when we were about 45, 50 people, we were about £18 million turnover when I joined. I think that when I first started my career, right, I think we were just at the birth of the internet when I started working in IT. My advice to anybody in that space of moving from the whatever kind of traditional VoIP environment that is into, say, a Microsoft world, is that ecosystem is so important. It's a massive distraction. It's a massive opportunity, I think, is what I'd say. And if I look at the traditional adoption curve of any new technology, right, the excitement and passion and demand for Copilot before you could buy it was just off the chart.
Welcome to another episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. Microsoft Mentors is designed to lift the lid on the journeys of the most successful leaders in the Microsoft partner ecosystem. Every week, through candid conversations with founders, business owners, and technology thought leaders, we explore their strategies, grit, and lessons behind their growth, and how they're building competitive advantage for the future. These are the untold stories and practical lessons from leaders who are defining success in Azure, AI, data, app innovation, and security. Our mission is simple: to tell partner stories at scale and create impactful Microsoft conversations. Hello and welcome to another episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. This week I'm joined by Rob Quickenden from Cisilion. Nice to meet you, Rob.
Hello, mate. You all right?
Yes, all good. Me and Rob were just pre-recording, chewing the fat about podcasting. Rob's starting the podcast journey yourself at the moment, then, are you?
Yeah, I do a little bit. So part of my sort of MVP contributions, I thought it was good just to talk about some of the topics. So yeah, I had a go myself of podcasting. So it's called Under the Surface. I'm sure you can share the link, but yeah, obviously welcome some follows and subscribers. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So this is always the sort of the format with Microsoft Mentors. It's all about getting underneath the career journeys and the business journeys of leaders like yourself in the Microsoft ecosystem. So I guess if we walk it backwards a couple of years, shall we say, Rob? Where did life in IT originate for you? What did that sort of pathway into the industry originally look like for you?
Yeah, definitely a couple of years ago. You're far too kind, and the face filter is definitely doing a good job. So yeah, where did it all start? So it started for me. I remember being at school. My mum worked in a school, and I remember being poorly one day, and there was no one to look after me. So I ended up sitting in the staff room at her work. I must have been 14 or something like that. And there was a guy there called Charlie who worked for a company called RM Education, or RM PLC as they were in the day. And I ended up feeling a lot better and following him around and just kind of thinking it's really quite cool taking PCs apart and doing bits and bobs of that. And then about 3 or 4 years later, I bumped into him again, and we were just talking, and I was just about to start a degree. And he said, look, when you finish, come and do some work with us. So that's kind of where it started. So I did a little bit of work with him, going around schools in Wiltshire, training teachers actually on how to use the internet and stuff. So I'm showing my age now, so I won't say the year, but you can all guess it. And it kind of evolved from there. So I joined the grad program, but prior to that, I did work experience for an oil company, doing, of all things, Windows 3.11 to Windows 95 upgrades on oil rigs in the North Sea, which was eye-opening experience, to say the least. And some of the things I'll tell you will probably be sent. So.
Was that floppy disk operating system deployment, was it?
Definitely was, yeah. Floppy disks. We'd written out a procedure called Magic Disk, which did the upgrades and stuff. It was. We had lions under the sea, but it was slower than slow. But that was kind of my intro really into things. I did a degree in computer science, as I say, and I started a grad program at RM Education in Abingdon, and spent 12 years there in multiple different roles. Went from exchange engineer to IT help desk, first line, second line, third line. Became a solution architect, worked on things like building schools for the future and academy programs and universities. So covered everything really from kind of mouse mats to data centers. So really kind of rounded role. And I think that kind of killed me a bit because I didn't really know what I wanted to specialize in. So, I kind of wanted to do a bit of everything. And I think I've been really lucky actually through my career in that I've managed to do that. So as I've kind of evolved through RM, I had a couple of little jobs outside of that, and then found myself in Cisilion running the head of pre-sales. So I ran the pre-sales team. When we were about 45, 50 people, we were about £18 million turnover when I joined. And I was a bit the same, I dabbled in lots of different bits of technology vendors I hadn't really done a lot of work with before. And like I say, I've been really lucky that I can continue to do that. So, I now have, we're now 170 million, 100 million, 100, not 170 million, 170 people and 100 million, I should say. And, the world continues to evolve at such pace. I think, we're back in almost the pace, I think, that when I first started my career, right? I think we were just at the birth of the internet when I started working in IT. And we're now really at that kind of real adoption hype curve of AI. And again, super exciting, having to learn new things. I do sometimes wish I'd been a plumber and just had to go through a very small amount of change. I'm sure plumbers will tell me very differently, but to go from copper pipes to plastic pipes was a big change. If I look at what we've been through in my lifetime so far, it continues to be so exciting.
Yeah. And it sounds like obviously throughout your career, although you were broad, and I think that's normally the nature in education, right? It's that schools and education institutions have lots of different needs when that comes to software, hardware, and everything.
Do you know what though, Wally? I find it quite funny, right? And I won't talk too much about it, but I remember people used to say to me, "Oh, education, like, what's complicated about that?" I'll tell you what was really complicated about working in education is that when you work for a company, typically people just want the technology to work and they want it to do their job and be fast and quick and everything else. When you work in education, everybody wants to break it and hack it. When they rip keys off things and unplug things and stick bubble gum in ports and steal stuff, it's a really, really strange place to work. Super exciting, work with really great people, but very, very different to working in kind of corporate enterprise IT.
Yeah. The kids always trying to circumnavigate the filters, the internet filters, to get onto their favourite little game site, which is what I used to do when I was at school.
And they know more than the teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But obviously, Microsoft is a conduit probably throughout your career. Then, talking about early operating systems deployments and Exchange migrations, and then I guess that's kind of led to where you're at now at Cisilion, and obviously on the MVP side of things as well. So with that pre-sales role initially then at Cisilion, was that focused on the Microsoft tech stack? Was it broad across all of Cisilion's services?
No, not at all. So my career in IT, my interest in computing started in the Commodore world. So I was, I had a VIC-20, a Commodore 16, 64, Amiga. That was kind of where I worked up to. And I remember having this big box Amiga 2000 thing and buying a PC emulator card for it, which ran like 286 chipsets and stuff. So obviously working in my industrial placement year, working at RM, there was a lot of Microsoft stuff, but really I was kind of more involved in the networky side and security side of things in those, because we had our own software, so I couldn't really get involved too much in that side of things. Coming to Cisilion, we didn't do any Microsoft at all. We were our name comes from the CIS from Cisco and Ilion. So we used to be a distributor called Ilion, and that's where our kind of name came from. So my background coming into Cisilion was really, traditional networking security stuff. We did lots of Cisco WebEx, contact center, all that kind of stuff. No Microsoft at all. And we built a Microsoft practice, and I was asked to go and build a Microsoft practice mainly because 3 or 4 years after joining, we started to see lots of Skype for Business stuff going on, and we were losing, or had the potential to lose customers that were long-term Cisco clients. So we built a bit of a knee-jerk, really. We built a little Microsoft practice to just protect our customer base, and it just grew and grew and grew. So it was it almost wasn't planned until we then
Yeah.
took a step back and went, okay, we now need to kind of do this properly. So we kind of drew a line under what we'd done and then said, right, okay, let's now do it properly. So we had to kind of educate ourselves on the Microsoft Partner Program, which is quite, very complex compared to others. Lots of moving parts. I mean, it continues to evolve. So yeah, we built a practice around that, and it, like I said at the beginning, really, it was about trying to fend our ground, and we were good at it. We had some good
Yeah.
people, we hired some good people, and I think the people that we hired in that space recognize, I think, that you have to keep learning, right? To be in the Microsoft world, you have to keep learning. You go to sleep at night, you wake up, the world is changing. So we just got really good at this stuff, and we centered ourselves around collaboration initially, and then this thing called Teams came along, and that kind of changed everything, really, because you suddenly moved away from having to know a product to actually having to know a whole ecosystem, and it's really teams that in many ways helped redefine us, in that it increased our skill set, it increased the projects that we got involved in as well, and it also massively helped us through COVID, right?
Yeah.
COVID struck, and we saw this kind of collaboration world just go crazy, and yeah, we, like many organizations in our position, we did really well during that time. We did, we had to do a lot of things. We helped a lot of customers out that were in difficult predicaments with technology, but we really rode that cloud wave quickly. And, Cisco and Microsoft are now our core strategic vendors, and we've got ecosystem partners around the edge. But we've got into most of that stack, really, and it just lit a bit of a fuse for me, I think, on the Microsoft side, because it was new and shiny, and I love new and shiny. And anyone that knows me knows that I get really bored if things are constant. So
Yeah.
I continually need a new challenge, and I like to build and grow things. And we've got a really awesome team that we've built, and it's opened up a whole new world of customers to us and a whole new market to our existing customers. So it's not one or the other. It's very much Cisco and Microsoft for us, but it's meant that we could really double down on those technologies. And we, in reality, we cover, probably 90% ish of what any customer may want to buy.
Yeah. And with that sort of shift from the Skype for Business world to the Teams world, then, so was the big need, I guess, in terms of you and your team having to upscale Skype for Business being more of a VoIP product, whereas Teams so embedded, so you then need to have all of the integrations into SharePoint, into all of the other moving parts. So that sort of shift from being standalone VoIP product to being full ecosystem, you've then got to upskill the team, bring in the skills that know not just the VoIP solution, but actually the whole Microsoft collaboration and 365 suite as well alongside it.
Yeah, and it is a and I guess my advice to anybody in that space of moving from the whatever kind of traditional VoIP environment that is into, say, a Microsoft world, is that ecosystem is so important. And I think fundamentally getting your head around Entra ID, Azure AD as everyone knows it,
Yeah.
and those connected aspects of things. Because when you work in those siloed products, you don't really have to worry. That's someone else's thing to worry about. And
Yeah.
you absolutely need to understand the way the Microsoft architecture works. Fundamentally, teams outside of the meeting bits and those things, it's all built on SharePoint. SharePoint is everything. It connects everything together, and therefore you need to understand how the security, governance, and frameworks work around those things. So naturally, the mindset of what is extensively wide. So if I look at a lot of our Microsoft solution architects, they are probably far more T-shaped than some of our more traditional architects in other technology and other vendor areas, where they are very, very solid,
Yeah.
and know everything in a much more narrow stack. And I think that's certainly the world that's evolving. And Cisco are doing that as well, right? It is evolving in that space as well, as more becomes kind of cloud and connected components. But it is definitely it was definitely a wake up call, I think, and far more complex than we probably realized initially from a skilling perspective. But we have the same challenges that a lot of our customers have, and therefore that's the value that we add to our clients.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess that's a track that's going to continue, right? With Copilot, with SharePoint being a central hub around it, and having to know a whole ecosystem. Where are conversations with Cisilion and Cisilion customers in terms of that adoption journey with Copilot? How mature are some businesses? Are businesses there ready and flying? Is there still a lot of education and adoption to go on there? What's that look like on the Copilot side?
It's a massive distraction. It's a massive opportunity, I think, is what I'd say. And if I look
Yeah,
at the traditional, adoption curve of any new technology, right, the excitement and passion and demand for Copilot before you could buy it was just off the chart, right? It was absolutely like it was like magic stuff.
yeah,
And we were demoing these things as Microsoft were to customers, potential customers, and no one actually had access to this stuff. It was all videos and slideware stuff. And then it kind of came along, and there was a real, almost like demotivation, I think, in that, oh, okay, it doesn't actually do have to do some stuff
yeah,
before you kind of turn it on. It was like, yeah, we've kind of been saying that for 12 months, but of course, oh, yeah, we'll turn it on, it'll be fine. So if I think where we are on the curve, we've gone through this kind of massive hype cycle. We've then had loads of organizations buy this stuff without really understanding. It was the utopia dream for everything, yet nobody quite understood what and how it would do it. And so I think we then hit this kind of, the decline hit, right, where people had the technology, organizations weren't really investing the time, they weren't really thinking about the process once they got beyond the, summarize this meeting, which is, by the way, is awesome. And now I think we're back on this upward trajectory again, where we've got this a little bit of right. We need to really think about those kind of functional parts of our business, and of course, the product's evolving, right? So, and I remember saying this to, in fact, I think someone might have said this to me. I don't think this is my own. I'm not going to take the credit for what I'm about to say, but we talk about the version of Copilot that you're using today is the worst version you will ever use, right?
yeah,
Which sounds really negative, right? But that pace of innovation and change is so rapid, and there's stuff coming that I saw a couple of weeks ago over at MVP Summit, which obviously I can't disclose, but
yeah,
is just even more breathtaking than the stuff we are seeing today. And of course, we're seeing that innovation across all the vendors, right? It's not just Microsoft, but because it's entrenched in all the products and the tools that we use today, it makes that adoption, if you're bought into it, so much more rapid and easier from both a security, from a governance, and from an adoption perspective. But what we've seen as the real areas where organizations need help is firstly in that realization stage. So we still have to revisit that. What's it capable of and what isn't it capable of? And we're now shifting beyond that kind of personal productivity, which we talked about,
yeah,
summarize this, do this for me, write my notes up, into organizational efficiency of this next wave, which is this autonomous AI, right? So the ability and Copilot actions, as Microsoft call them. So the ability to actually do things on behalf of other people almost without permission, which sounds really scary, right? But it's more, so it's that kind of combination of low code stuff that exists within the Power Platform world and those connected interfaces into Copilot. I mean, the adoption thing is huge, and I think it's still misinvested, I think, in organizations of actually how much work you need to do, not because the product's not very good, but because it is a fundamentally different way of working. If you think back to those days, I don't know whether you're old enough, Ollie, to remember it or not, so I'm going to compliment you on that. But the days of getting internet search right, if you remember, it was
yeah,
like, oh, this doesn't work for me. And we mastered this way of learning how to search for things effectively. We became ninjas at search. And I remember it going into CVs. Knowing how to search the web was a CV quality. And I think we've got the same with AI. Actually really understanding what makes a prompt. And it's not because these tools aren't very good. It's because you need to be. I often refer to working with Copilot as working with a drunk intern, maybe just an intern. Maybe I shouldn't say the word drunk, but a drunk intern. It's really, really, really clever, but you need to keep it focused, and you need to be very clear about what you want and what you don't want in the outcome. And I think prompting will get cleverer in the way it interprets what you want to do as these tools develop memory, which
yeah,
is good and bad. They'll know a bit more, but if you get that kind of right, and you need to drive that habit forming way of working, it's phenomenal. But we are just at the beginning. Security is also massive, right? And not so much, I think, about the security of Copilot, because if you trust Microsoft and you trust the cloud and Microsoft Cloud, then kind of you're trusting Copilot. But organizations have not, many have not really got their head around where their data is, what data they've got, who's got access to it. And that's not because the tools aren't very good. It's just always been so difficult to find stuff, in SharePoint sites and team sites and file servers and those kind of things. You've naturally had this kind of security through obscurity approach.
Yeah.
Whereas now, of course, Copilot is the world's best search engine. It's very good at finding things. And so therefore you have to tune your system to know, who has got access to what. Is Copilot going to surface information that maybe someone shouldn't have access to, but it has? Bear in mind, it operates under user context. And thirdly, is the data relevant? And I think actually the relevancy of data is sometimes more important than the security of it, because there is so much old, redundant, duplicate data out there. And as smart as something like Copilot is, if you gave me 15 versions of the same file with the same file name, all called final 1, version 1, final draft, I probably couldn't tell you, unless I authored it, what version is current. And this is some of the challenges that we see. Yeah. So very long answer to your question, is there still work to do? Loads.
Yeah.
But I think every piece of work we do, the better the results.
And it goes back to that data, quality of data. Where is that data? How is it stored? How is it organized? I mean, if you wanted to do a Copilot audit on my SharePoint, you would see lots of version final drafts 3.0, 4.0. And like you say, the sensitivity label side of things, the data governance side of things, who has access to what. Because like you say, if you just click go and roll out Copilot without doing that piece first, then you put a really powerful tool into your organization, but also a tool that can be used that, if the right permissions aren't in place, the receptionist can access the CEO's personal documents and vice versa, isn't it? So it's all about...
And that's the massive fear factor, isn't it? There's a massive fear factor about that, which then inhibits adoption. So it's about, like anything, it's trying to do it, in chunks, slowly, with guardrails. But I think far better in many cases, the flip side of not doing it, and this is the danger that we see, is that organizations get scared to do it, so therefore they don't do it. And then what you end up with is loads of shadow AI. So people just use anything, and there's not controls in place. People are copying and pasting stuff into other tools, and they're not kind of using AI, but they are without realizing it. And that opens up loads of challenges. So when we go back to your point earlier about skills and stuff, again, Copilot starts off as, it's essentially a SaaS app within Office 365. But the layers of skill sets that you need to understand, you need to have your head around data governance and compliance. You need to be able to look at security. You need to understand about how the groupings work. SharePoint management becomes huge. There's loads of changes coming into SharePoint Advanced Management, all these kind of premium SKUs that Microsoft, start off by charging for, and then generally include some of them within the license. But it's constantly evolving. So again, that point of you just end up stretching your T wider, and you end up with a big, I don't know what that shape even looks like, a big fat square, I guess. Right? You've got to be really tall and really wide.
What are the dangers for organisations? If you've got an organisation, for example, that looks at that and goes, it's a lot of work to do there, actually, let's just not bother. But then you've got a workforce that's got an appetite for being able to leverage these sort of tools, and they go, okay, well, if we've not got Copilot in our own ecosystem, I'm going to go take this sales proposal and I'm going to run it through ChatGPT or run it through Perplexity. What are the dangers to an organisation of their staff going outside into other ecosystems that aren't managed and sort of in more public AI forums to leverage potentially sensitive information in those platforms?
Yeah, I think, Ollie, you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, that is definitely a risk, right? You've got these, I mean, not even free tools sometimes, they can be very expensive, tools like Perplexity and ChatGPT. If you pay for the premium SKUs, they're not cheap. Some of those advanced models or advanced premium licenses do give you elements of of data protection. They do guarantee they won't train models. So some of that stuff is a bit of a myth that's always the case. But there's lots of consumerization of, every single mobile app you've got now has got an AI in it somewhere, right? And no one reads the small print. You scroll down 56 pages of stuff and you click accept and you just start sticking your data all over the place. So I think there is a danger of that, certainly. But I think the other danger of that as well is if you don't embrace it and at least have a plan to look at it properly and evolve it, then your employees are going to demand that and they're going to want that. And they'll either go somewhere else where that's being used, or you're going to suddenly start to really fall behind from an efficiency perspective because those things are being done. I mean, I think today it's quite easy to spot some of the AI written text. They generally all start the same way unless you kind of coax it. But I think taking people through what good looks like, how to use these things, what to use it for, remembering that it's a co-pilot in the world of Microsoft. It's called that for a reason. You are the author of your content. I mean, this will evolve as we go to autonomous actions and these kind of things. But it's a bit like the internet back in the day, right? There were lots and lots of failed initiatives for doing stuff online, and you hear a lot, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And there will be with Copilot. It's an AI generally. It's new, it's shiny, it's evolving at a pace that is just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal, and scary for some. But if you're not in it, you're falling further behind. So you're going to have some failures. You're going to have things that don't work. It's going to cost you money. You're going to have to invest, even if it's in people time and training and security and upskilling and those things. But if you don't do it, you're just going to fall further behind.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many parallels between the public cloud era and acceleration into public cloud in Microsoft and Azure, and obviously other vendor hyperscaler clouds and AI, isn't there? This shift from on-premise workloads into Azure, and the change and adoption that organizations had to go into, and transformation to move into things like Azure. We're doing that again in AI, but the rate of innovation that we thought was fast-paced with Azure, and still is fast-paced with Azure, is then at lightning speed with AI, isn't it? So it's just keeping up with the change.
Yeah, and there's a massive misunderstanding, I think, out there. Well, not misunderstanding, but confusion and blur between, people talk about, building their own AI models and language models and everything else. And the amount of people I hear that talk about that, and they're not doing those things. They're not, they think that by having Copilot or something else and pointing it at a data source, that's a language model. It's not, that they're using language models, typically multiple language models, on there to reason over their own data and their own insights. And for most organizations, that's still a massive piece of work. And I think the big piece of work is, we see lots more organizations moving stuff to SharePoint. Totally. We see more cloud migrations and more data connectivity going on. Absolutely. But there is also that mindset of you're not going to put everything in the Microsoft cloud, right? So there is, if you're born in the Microsoft cloud environment, you're in a really good position because there's native connectors. It's a lot easier to kind of connect these things together. You've probably got your licensing. Most enterprise organizations don't have that. They've got ERP systems, they've got HR systems, they've got all these other things. And actually the real value for the majority of employees and customers is actually connecting those sources as well to those tools you're investing in. So I think, and that's another skill set again. So you've got that, and this goes for partners as well, or partner to partner. We have a lot of skills in house, and we have some very good partners that we work with for niche things. But that ability to help organizations connect their chosen AI platform to other application services as well is massive.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, we could talk all day, couldn't we, about the rate of change in that world. So if we swing back round to sort of Cisilion and that sort of initial journey, bit of a leap of faith and necessity to move into the Microsoft partner ecosystem, I guess, are there big differences between the sort of the Cisco partner ecosystem and vendor relationships and how it works in the Microsoft world? Are they fairly similar? What's the sort of the differences? And I guess, how do you as a business manage having those two sort of core vendors that you're sort of driving out in the market?
Yeah, they are different, and partly due to just the sheer size and number of Microsoft partners that are out there. I mean, Ollie, you'll probably know the stat more than me, but there's thousands of partners just in the UK, and Microsoft evolved the way they want partners to work. They go from wanting partners to do everything to partners to be niche, and they kind of go back the other way. We flitter in and out as a partner between being managed and not being managed, from that perspective. So, Microsoft are gradually evolving the way the partner model works, more with less, and, breadth with fewer. Cisco are very different. Cisco are a much smaller partner team, and there's far less of them. So therefore you get a lot more interaction. We have people in Cisco we have people from Cisco in our offices every week. Microsoft very rarely, unless you're doing an event or you generally have to go to them. They are very, very different. Outside the people management side of things, they are quite similar. Cisco is a hardware company that is now really a software company. It's evolved massively into that approach. They're newer into software than Microsoft, therefore they do things sometimes better. They also learn from people like Microsoft. The big thing with a similarity, I think, is coming across, as both are very software driven, is the concept of subscriptions and the concept of adoption. And that's huge. We as a partner are measured on the adoption and success rates of the usage of their product sets. And that's how partners get rewarded in terms of rebates, and there's all sorts of incentive schemes that partners can access that provides value back to their customers, right? So whether that's through funding for workshops to drive vision and value, whether that's rebates to enable you to invest in your service teams and your support functions and those kind of things. And it's a very similar model. So I would definitely say different, but also very similar, and probably becoming more similar as we kind of evolve more into that kind of world.
Yeah. I thought we'd take a very quick break from this week's episode of Microsoft Mentors podcast to just talk a little bit about why the podcast and the community that it serves is so important to us as part of our purpose here at Cloud Decisions, and the purpose it drives within the wider Microsoft ecosystem. We've been involved here at Cloud Decisions in the Microsoft ecosystem for over a decade now, working with Microsoft partners and businesses with strong alignment to Microsoft technologies and their technology teams to help them to grow and scale their teams in cloud, security, data, and AI. For the past year, we've been working really hard behind the scenes to develop two core talent solutions that are built with our customers in mind and enable Microsoft aligned businesses to access the talent they need to grow and scale their teams and ultimately hit their business objectives. We've developed CDX, our own proprietary talent intelligence system that uses custom AI, large language models and natural language processing to enable you as an organization, as a technology leader, to make insight-led technology decisions on all of your permanent hires, and gives us the data that we really need to take your role to market to execute the search. We've also been working with customers here in the UK and in the US through Global Source, our global talent solution that is built to enable organizations to build borderless technology teams for permanent, contract, and flexible outsourced resources. So if you're a Microsoft partner or you are a technology leader within a business with a strong Microsoft technology alignment, and you'd like to know a little bit more about how CDX could fuel your permanent hires or how Global Source could offer you a global talent strategy, then feel free to reach out. And now let's get back to this week's episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. And then in terms of your own journey at Cisilion, obviously you started in that, was it head of pre-sales? Was that your first role at Cisilion, was it?
Yeah, so I've done a couple of roles. I mean, as a smaller business, obviously we're very. I've never really been a big fan of job titles. I think sometimes I'm the most senior person in the room, sometimes I'm the most irrelevant person in the room, right? And I think I've always been taught by my boss. So my boss joined roughly the same time as me. He's the owner's son. The owner's the chairman. Nick Paul, our CEO, is kind of friend and mentor and everything with me, and I've worked with him for many years. But he's a real believer in hiring people better than you, and I certainly have got that. I think, the team of people that work with me, for me, are brilliant, absolutely brilliant, keen to learn, very customer centric. But yeah, I've gone from head of pre-sales, um, into kind of strategy role, into now kind of CTO, and I look after the pre-sales team. So my role's going to evolve, but I look after all of our pre-sales team. I look after our product and licensing specialists. I look after our managed service team, and but very much, get involved. I do a lot of work with our clients. I do a lot of work with our vendors. It's really fun. I think I'm really lucky. I think I wake up every day. I enjoy my job. Every day is different. My children want to start. I mean, they've got 8-9 years to go, but they are desperate to come and work for us, which is great. I love that. I absolutely love that.
Took one of your kids into the Sicilian office for the day for the Easter holidays.
I did. I took him in. We had his name on the meeting panel. He came in with a bowl of Cocoa Pops and a decaf coffee he got from the coffee machine. One of the sales team, shout out Johnny, bless him. We arranged a video call, and he sat on a call. And he taught him how to sell. So it was great, and obviously I had to pay him. I had to give him. I had to pay him from the company, but it's great. I think we are a very family oriented business, and we're family owned, right? But it's great to see that level of humanity, I think, that technology brings to people.
Yeah. And was that sort of moving into strategic and leadership type roles always something that you saw you progressing your career towards? Because I find a lot of the time that people that have come from that technical engineering background, they move into architecture. A lot of the time they end up in this fork in the road where actually it's like, do they continue to be super niche technical and just become, really narrow specialist in a particular area? Or do they look at other avenues, maybe pre-sales, and then ultimately move into more strategic leadership type roles? So was that a strategy that you always thought you'd try and achieve, or was it just following the road where it went?
No, do you know what? I'm going to probably make myself totally unemployable after saying this, but I think I've always had that real curiosity for new things. Whether that's ADHD, I don't know. My family are all ADHD, but I'm inquisitive, and I want to look at new things. Did I aspire into kind of being, I want to manage loads of people? Probably not. I did kind of fall into it naturally, and I think my natural style of working with people is to kind of, I don't like the word lead, but really just to inspire others. And I think it kind of goes on to some of the other extracurricular activities that I do. I like to work with different people that have interests, that love what I love, and I think working in Cisilion has given me that. I think it's did I join thinking I would be there I've been there for 13 years this year. Did I think I'd be there for 13 years? Absolutely not. But the role and the technologies that we work with keep evolving, and we've got some amazing customers. The people we've got are brilliant. And the technologies we work in are just super exciting. And I think, so no, I kind of fell into it. But I totally get what you're saying. It's are there people that have done bigger, more senior leadership roles than me? Absolutely. And I'm looking for those kind of people. I know we're having a conversation where we're looking for those kind of people. But I think to me, it's like, if you've got people that love what they do, they're passionate about what they do, and they care, to me, I want to speak to those people every day.
Yeah. And on that sort of that track of extracurricular activities, when did the MVP part of your sort of Microsoft world start? How long have you been an MVP for now?
So I was what I call a weird MVP, actually. So I started my MVP career as a beta tester in the Windows world. So I did a lot of the Windows Phone. I'm going to things from the grave now. Windows Phone, early adopter, Windows 10 early adopter, and they had an MVP program especially for the Windows Insider and Office Insider community, and that merged a couple of years ago into the Windows. So I was in that kind of category for, I think, 5. I look at my trophy, 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of morphed into the Windows and devices world, which is kind of where I sit now. again, I really struggle. Right? I get involved in all different aspects of the Microsoft stuff, and you kind of have to put yourself in a little box, which I'm
Yeah.
not good at doing. So I kind of sit really in the Windows and devices side, which looks after things like AVD, Windows 365, Windows Surface, that kind of hands-on touch stuff. But I think regardless of the category that you fit within, again, it's a great community of just surrounding yourself with people that are excited about technology, want to help other people, want to see the outcomes that technology has, whether that's on teaching and learning, whether that's for inclusion and disability, whether that's for not for whatever it is about. It's just a community of people that want to help each other, and I've never met such a great group of people that just want to help you. Like, they just want to lean out and help, and they want to bring you into things, and it's great. It's like an extension of work, but it's just out of hours.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
It's so true, though, isn't it? I think, and that's one thing that probably flows out of the way that Microsoft have built their whole partner ecosystem, and then that flows through down into the MVP program, and that flows out into the wider community. And now we're in an amazing position, especially in the UK, in terms of user groups, right up and
Yeah,
down the country. You could go to every major city probably in the UK now, and there will be an Azure, probably a
yeah,
data platform, Copilot or M365 user group, where you can, if you're deeply embedded in Microsoft technologies, you can do all of your formal learning through certifications and training, but you can also go down once a month and talk to other people who are doing the same sort of thing as you and understand what are their use cases, what are their challenges, how did they get across that barrier, and that community bit just drives everyone forward, doesn't it?
yeah. And I think it's just about, I think when you're in work mode, when you're at work, people have got a job to do, right? You've got a job to do. You've got numbers to hit. Every organisation has got KPIs to hit and those kind of things. I think what kind of joins the dots is if you can join the dots in your career. And I've always been that kind of person that I can't, work to me is part of my life, right? It's
Yeah.
not, I go to work, I come back, I switch off, I do something totally different. Technology and, seeing tech for good is just part of what I've always been. I'm a Cub leader as well. I try and take technology into that. I mean, Cubs is a very old school. We read maps and we have all surveys and we build fires and we burn things and all that stuff. But bringing technology into every single aspect of our life is so important. My children, the same, are you know are use technology not just for gaming and watching YouTube videos, but they are creators, they are content creators, and they are relatively advanced in the way they use technology. Because they see me doing it,
Yeah.
and I think, I don't know, I think they just have that same creative, explorative gene that I potentially have, and it's the future of everything, right? I think, I'm not saying it is everything, but it is the future of most things.
Yeah, so it's amazing how these technologies do end up embedded in your day-to-day life. Like, if I think about me now, 6-9 months ago, if I needed the answer to something, I would Google it.
Yeah,
Now, my go-to is I go to ChatGPT because it's going to give me a
yeah,
more accurate answer or a deeper level of understanding than a bunch of pages that I then need to click onto the page to get the information to. So yeah, it's amazing how it all embeds into your working life, productivity within businesses, but also your personal life as well.
totally. Yeah, my son does the same. He has a little YouTube video on trains, and he used to do a lot of his research in the same way. Um, I would say he's got lazy now. He asks Copilot a bunch of questions, and it almost writes him a script. And I think he's learned that it doesn't sound like him, and he's evolving it. But it's an interesting challenge. And I think, again, going back to the educational roots, like teachers used to worry about kids having calculators. They've
Yeah.
got. I would not want to be a teacher right now. I absolutely respect them, but the technology that is in people's hands is incredible, and you still got to teach people the concepts of how to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And it goes, keeping on that education track, it's things like if you think about how a university is going to combat in the use of ChatGPT for dissertation,
Yeah,
writing and curating, there'll be plagiarism tools out there, but are they going to keep up with the rate of change that's going on with these multi-billion-pound tech companies? No.
yeah, yeah.
So that's always the battle, isn't it? It's always the light and the dark side of every single technology.
And I think it's just about what you score changes, right? I think it's and this is always the struggle, isn't it? Is that the pace of things like changing a curriculum, as an example, you don't do overnight. Whereas ChatGPT, as an example, I know it was being worked on. There were versions before, version 3 that everyone got their hands on in, when was it, December 22. But for many people, it just appeared,
Yeah.
and the ability to evolve the way in which you use technology, trust technology, learn things, and get tested on things can't change at the pace that technology is going. So I think over time we're going to have to evolve. The way in which we use technology will evolve. What we use it for will evolve, and therefore the way in which we measure people and we teach people new skills will need to evolve, because it's here. If you want to learn something, like you say, you can craft a prompt. If you want to, don't know whether you've seen it, there's a new tool in Copilot called Visual Creator. You can literally point it at a website or a document, and it'll go and create a video for you using stock imagery, without having any skills at all
Yeah.
on how to use video editing. But what it does is it drives you to those platforms, and before you know it, you do learn it, because it's not perfect and you do have to tweak it, and therefore before you know it, you're a video editor.
Yeah.
It's
100%.
exciting. It's exciting.
Definitely. And if we look at sort of the future for Cisilion, so I think we said, was it 40-ish people and 18 million when you started? Now 100 million, 170 people.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
the sort of the plan for Cisilion? Have you got growth targets, headcount, revenue targets that you guys are working to? What does that all look like?
Yeah, so we doubled down a couple of years ago on our core strategic vendors. So we do others, obviously, because the world isn't just Cisco, Microsoft, but we're quite cautious in the way that we evolve. We want to be known for those things, and I think it gives us a good differentiation in the market. We absolutely want to grow our relevance. I think for us, it's about staying relevant to our clients. I think customers can buy from anybody. There's lots of people that do similar things to us. We are absolutely about, passion, energy, doing the right thing. We have a set of core values, of course, but to me, it's about relevance, right? If you're not relevant to your client, if you don't offer good value, if you don't have great people, then, your customers will leave you. Yes, we want growth. Of course we do. Where we want to invest more. We want to invest more in good causes. We want to pay people better. All of those things. To do that, we've got to sell more things. So absolutely, we've got growth targets. We are literally on the cusp of that 100 million number, which is a big milestone to hit. As a business, but we don't want to stop. I mean, if you have my chairman or our CEO on, he'd be going, 250 million, a billion. Where do you stop? And I think it's about healthy, sustained, profitable growth is kind of what we're looking for. And at the moment, I think we work with the right vendors in that space to help fuel that.
Yeah. 100%. Cool. Really, really interesting story, Rob. We've covered lots of stuff. I always like to close Microsoft Mentors with the Microsoft Mentors quickfire round.
I did wonder whether this was going to come up, because I watched your last one had a quickfire round. So
you're not getting away with it that easily. So we'll do a couple of this or that type questions, and then a few fun ones afterwards. So I think I might know the answer to this, given what you're an MVP for. But when it comes to desktop and operating systems, Windows or Mac?
Oh, Windows.
Thought that might be the answer. All in cloud or hybrid cloud?
It's hybrid cloud. I think everyone that says it's all cloud, unless you're starting from scratch, you're going to be hybrid cloud.
Yeah, absolutely.
But more cloud.
In terms of your sort of day-to-day usage, obviously you spoke quite a lot about AI. Are you doing more in Copilot or ChatGPT day to day?
Copilot, because, why would I not? It's a similar technology. And, people often, I'm going to ask another question, but everyone always says to me, how often do you use it? I use Copilot for pretty much everything, but not, do you mean, I don't mean I don't do any work, but I use it across everything. I use it for fact checking. I use it for checking what I've done. I use it for research. There's almost no task that I don't use it for at some point.
Yeah. What's your favourite Microsoft technology as a suite or as an individual tool of all time?
Oh, am I allowed to?
You can, yeah, of course you can.
So and you probably know, I've been a massive fan of the Microsoft device categories for years. So the Surface devices, and I think to me again that then goes in line with, it's not just about the device or an operating system; it's about that combination of technology. And I think Microsoft does something which no other Microsoft OEM can do. And that's not to say that, Dell, HP, etc. don't have some great kit, but Microsoft owning that ecosystem from chip to cloud through the operating system, things like pen and ink on a Surface is just phenomenal. Built into the operating system, seamlessly integrated. The only other vendor that can do that is Apple.
Yeah.
And to me, it is about that harmony of the hardware and the software layer.
If only they'd managed to nail the Windows Phone as well.
If only.
Yeah. What's your, outside of sort of software products, in terms of hardware, tech gadgets, what's your favourite tech gadget that you've got right now?
Right now, it's my growing set of AV and photography podcasting kit that I randomly decided to get into. So that's kind of where I've been buying random things on Vinted and eBay, just to try and keep my costs down. So yeah, I've got some nice new mic setups and new cameras and stuff that I'll be playing around with.
Yeah. Well, look at me. If you're anything like me, just buy everything just because of the lights. This microphone was bought purely because it's got lights on it.
I had seen that. I do like that.
Yeah.
Although it doesn't move. The lights don't interact when you talk, do they?
No. So you can do that, and we're going to get into a little bit of podcast geekery here. So sorry, listeners. So you can do that, but what I've found is when that's on cycling lights, the camera auto adjusts the light settings because it picks up this because it's in the front of the camera.
Yeah, of course.
So it changes the light balance and the white balance on the camera all the time. So I've had to change it on to stick on the lights. So
yeah, I moved my camera for this. So normally I've got some nanoleaf lights behind me. Same thing. If they're on, it does mess up your video, but they're quite cool.
Yeah,
bit Star Trek.
And then we'll go for a good old classic. So it's Friday night. You've had a hard week at work. You just need to get a takeaway. What's your go-to takeaway choice, and what's your order?
My go-to takeaway is always Chinese, because I always feel quite disappointed with going to a Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
So it's always Chinese. If I'm going to do takeaway, I do it bad. And
yeah,
so it's Chinese. However, on a Friday night, I run a Cub group, so it tends to be a Snickers bar on the way home from Cubs.
Nice. Well, Rob, thanks very much for joining us. Just what was your podcast again as well that you're starting off, and we'll make sure that it's linked in with everything.
It's called Under the Surface. So it's really about exploring, as it says, really, beneath the layer of the tech. So why technology? The technology combining with business aspect of stuff. I've done 2 so far, covered one around the history of Surface devices and the innovation that's brought its way to some of the things we talked about today. So from things like Windows Hello and Touch and Pen and how that's manifested itself. And also had a great interview with the product lead for Windows 365, which was really interesting as well. So thank you for the plug.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thanks very much for your time. It's been really interesting to find a bit more about your story in the Microsoft ecosystem, how that's evolved at Cisilion. So thanks for your time, and I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
We will. And Ollie, just to say to you, I think this is a really great podcast series you're doing. I think I listen to this now weekly. Well, we're not weekly. Every time I get a new notification. Is that weekly? Is it weekly? Every 2 weeks, isn't it?
weekly or every 2 weeks, depending on guest availability. We're aiming for weekly, but there's little gaps. Like this week with obviously Easter holidays and stuff, we've had a bit of a gap, but we're trying to get as close to weekly as we can.
But they're great. They're great listening points. So yeah, great. And thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
No, you too, Rob. I'll catch you soon.